Good evening. I would like to call to order the Cumberland School Committee meeting today, Thursday, July 17th, 2025, at 7:07 p.m. in the Cumberland High School Transitional Building. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Approval of agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Ms. Shea. Second by Mr. Bacon. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. I'll just mention for the record that Ms. Feather is absent this evening. Consent agenda. Approval of minutes, special meeting 7/3/2025, regular meeting 6/26/2025, executive session meeting 6/26/2025, enrollment report 7/10/2025, transportation report June 2025, residency truancy report July 2025, and school bus inspection report from 6/24/2025. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Ms. Goldstein, second by Mr. Bacon. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. Report out of executive session meeting. I just want to state for the record that under C, Personnel Matters, Exception 1, Number 2, Litigation Update, including Ross versus Town of Cumberland et al., it was inadvertently noticed under Exception 1. It should have been noticed under Exception 2. There was no discussion of any individual's job performance. Report out of executive session votes. There were no votes taken. A vote to seal minutes of executive session. Can I have a motion to seal the minutes?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Shea. Second by Ms. Goldstein. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 5-1 with Mr. Dean in the negative. Personnel announcements. Dr. Thornton.
Madam Chair, we have several announcements this evening. First, we have 3 resignations. First, Marissa Gerena, a paraprofessional at B.F. Norton. Linda Snodgrass, grade 7 at McCourt, and Josh Lima, football coach at the high school. We have 2 unpaid leaves of absence for next year. Angela Simoes, grade 1 at Cumberland Hill, and Josh Lima, STEM teacher at Cumberland High School. We have 14 appointments. We have Amanda Foster, custodian, Knights at Community. We have Dennis Merchez, custodian, Knights at Cumberland High School. We have Margarita Soares, custodian, Knights at B.F. Norton, floater. We have Marissa Arthurs, ELA teacher at Cumberland High School. We have Jeffrey Avalon, math teacher at North. We have Kelly Brouillard, PEAPE Health at Cumberland Hill. We have Sally Cascione, special ed at Cumberland High School. We have Sarah Colson, Math Essentials at NCMS. We have Gina Fitzpatrick, grade 7 math at McCourt. Kim Holmes, special ed at Community. Joy Maimoni, MLL teacher, CHS. Jennifer Penny, grade 5 teacher at Cumberland Hill. Casey Reyna, special ed at Garvin. And Jessica Cuenga, at MLL teacher at CHS. So those are all the personnel announcements for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. The superintendent's report.
Yes, we just have the one item. We have school construction. As I mentioned a few of you earlier, this is our busiest summer yet. All 8 locations are being touched this summer in one way or another. We have playgrounds, we have demolition, we have science rooms being turned over, we have community school being finished, we have B.F. Norton School being started. The trans building upstairs is being worked on. So just some pictures for you to give you insight. On the left here, these are all the contents of community school. It's all in the gym upstairs. So once we're ready to open, all of that content gets transferred over to community school. This is the trans building. You had a meeting up here maybe a few months ago, and that's what it looks like right now. It's going to be a big open space for the preschool. Very exciting. Here, we had to trench up in the trans. Some of the plumbing has to go in for the small little toilets for the preschool, so we have to trench in some of the locations. That's what it looks like right now. That'll be closed up. I believe Saturday they're putting in cement, I think, that's what we're saying. And this is the upstairs trans. That goes back to the high school. Picture like an Apple Genius kind of bar vibe. That's an open space for the high school. That's going to be turned over. Over here, no longer will we have meetings in the future in Mr. Damana's room. It's a great room, Mr. Damana, but it's a little small. So now we have what was a grade 5 classroom, the old girls' locker room, will now be turned over into a PD meeting room. And that is the new doorway we cut in for that location, as you'll see in the coming weeks. And over here, just on the right, they're already gridding in all the areas. So they're working first shift, second shift when needed, and weekends. It all has to get done before we open. There's no option. So it is happening. Here we have the science labs. Once again, some trenching for some plumbing. Not a ton of work here, just ceiling grids, flooring, and cabinetry. But the 6 rooms per middle school are being made over, 12 rooms. That's all happening as we speak. Here, same idea, north science lab, same thing. The plumbing's done, very similar. You can see. Go ahead, Mike. Here now, community is really coming into its own. The bathrooms are pretty much done. That's a bathroom, what it looks like. Here's the new front entrance of community with the man trap, as we call it. Here's the new front desk for community. The whiteboards are up, and we have some great flooring in called LVT. It's like kind of fancier flooring. We use it because some of the old flooring at community, circa 1920, it's not, it's kind of bumpy, if you will, even when you mud it. So if you put down the standard flooring, it can kind of buckle through. LVT kind of hides the sins of 1920. So we put down the LVT. It's a sharp look. So next slide. This is the grade 3 hallway community. It's done. That's what it looks like when it's nice and clean. We have down the paper so we don't ruin Will's waxing work. And we had to retar the courtyard at community at no expense to the district. As you recall, last year we had a smelly paint issue. So either the application of the product or the product itself was a problem. So they ripped it up and put down tar per our request at no cost to us. So that was done. This is what I talked about. That's the floor before the LVT. They put down kind of the mud to kind of smooth things out, but that's the best you can get in 1920. So now we'll put that nice LVT flooring over that probably next week. Windows keep going in. There's a couple of views of the windows. They're almost all in. That was a preschool room that we were using just a few months ago, so they had to go in there now and get all those done. And Garvin's Playground's done. Looking for a ribbon cutting next week, but they did finish it. We have a fence to go still around the back, but our second playground is done. They start Ashton next week. That gets demoed next week. So that's exciting. We have one homework piece for Tim and Will. We're going to tar this ourselves. That's the trail getting to Garvin's Playground. That's on our list, gentlemen. Still to get done before we open, so we can't forget about that. And that's just, once again, a little commercial. If you're around for the ribbon cutting, Wednesday, July 23rd, 4 o'clock, we'll have a ribbon, we'll have scissors. So if you want to come by, that'd be great. So happy to answer any questions you have on construction.
Any questions from the committee?
All right. Mr. Bacon.
Mr. Bacon.
Over at Community, where they paved that courtyard, what is that
That structure?
thing? Yeah.
That was the architect's rendition of some kind of shade structure. In the spring and summer, or in the fall, a shade structure goes up several sails, and it's supposed to be like a gathering spot, I believe, for kids. So we took down the structures in the winter because of the elements, but Will has to put these things back up now before we open. So Will, another thing for your list. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It looks great. Appreciate it. Next is reports of standing committees. Fiscal Management Subcommittee update. Ms. Smith?
Yes, the fiscal subcommittee did meet earlier this evening. We do have payment of the bills that we'll go over later, and we do have resolutions that we'll discuss later. Some of the items that we did discuss during this was the federal funds. We still do not have that information, so we're not sure what we're going to have coming in. But if we don't see any of those funds, that's potentially a $400,000 hit to our budget, which is a couple of positions, which we will have to try to find ways, since those positions have already been filled. We'll have to find ways to look at that. That could get delayed out another 90 days. So Mr. McGrath and his team are working closely with RIDE. RIDE's working with the federal government, and we're just trying to wait and see what happens with it. The other thing I wanted to mention is all of the construction and everything that's happening. We go over a lot of that with the financial side of things as well and the fiscal. But one of the things that we do talk about often is our facilities team. And we have increased that staff last year, and we bought new equipment, we did certain things to change things around. I am so happy to report, and I cannot thank Mr. DeGisis and his team enough for this. All of the summer projects, on top of all of this construction that is happening, is taking up so much of everyone's time with the construction at every school. His team has stayed on top of everything that has to happen to get prepared for the schools to open, and they are ahead of schedule in different areas. They have one area that they're working on with the grounds. It's been a little bit tricky with the grounds. It's a little bit behind, but that's all still being done and kept up to. And every project that he has on the list is just running on target or ahead of schedule. He was saying how some of the high school was already prepared, and I know from sitting on this committee for the last 4 or 5 years, I've never seen it done that early. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team for all the hard work. It doesn't go unrecognized. Thank you.
Very nice, thank you. Policy and Procedures Subcommittee update, Ms. Feather is not here. Achievement and Communications Subcommittee update, we have no update. District Health and Wellness Subcommittee update, Ms. Shea?
We don't have an update, but we're hoping to get together in September at some point.
Great, thank you very much. Next is public hearing, reading of amended policies, E-2 Transportation. Ms. Smith?
Yes, this policy was on the agenda last meeting, if we recall, and it was not agended correctly, so we had to table it. So there was amendments made to the E2 policy so that it could outline more descriptive areas such as kindergarten students must be met at the bus, something that's always been done. You know, you have to have somebody there. It's in the policy now. It tied up the changes or asking, and so that students know that they only have one bus stop that has to be put in and requested. It goes by the home address. If there's a change, it has to be submitted, and that's a lock change. There's no going back and forth between the changes. So that was put in there, and I think there was one other, the video equipment, right, that video equipment was added to the buses, as we know that was put in with the town. So those 3 amendments were done, and I'd like to have this amendment voted on, I think, a little bit later. Right now, I think it's just being read into the record.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any public comment on the policy E-2 Transportation? Okay. Old business, discussion and a vote to approve amended policy E-2 Transportation. Do I have a motion to approve the amended policy?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Smith. Second by Ms. Goldstein. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. Comments from the public. Are there any comments from the public? Okay. Just for the video so they can hear you. Thank you. And if you don't mind, just stating your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes to speak. And we appreciate it.
So my name is Julie Vonderhyde. I'm 14 Katy Lane, Cumberland, Rhode Island. So it's more along the lines of a question than a comment, but it is to do with the policies and procedures, which would be related to the student handbook. So since there's a subcommittee person that's involved that's not here, I guess for clarification purposes, am I hearing that correctly? I don't know if I can even ask a question that will be answered at this point.
So normally, for public comment, we normally do not respond to public comment. But
Right,
you are
but, I
correct.
mean,
Ms.
I'm just-
Feather, who is the chair of policy, is
She-
not here this evening.
Right, and she would have addressed some kinds of changes that would be designed to be rolled out for the next school calendar year, is that correct? Okay, so concerns I have with the existing handbook as they sit today are in relation to the only handbook that I have in front of me, which is the one that we had to go by. And that would have to do with very specific information regarding student behavior, and then the codes that relate to it. And that's how I'm gonna leave it at this moment, but I don't believe there's a direct correlation to the codes in the handbook, the punitive behavior that's aligned with the codes in the handbook, and the way the handbook is written. And I'm not entirely sure who's responsible for that and how that's laid out, but I think that there's a lot of fault being pointed in one direction, even though there's a mission statement in the handbook. It's not entirely, I don't think this is what should be put out for next year. And I take a lot of issue with the way the handbook is, beyond just what I'm stating right now, which isn't very clear to you because we didn't have someone here from that subcommittee to address that. So that's all I really wanted to say at this moment, but very specific issue with this handbook as it sits. That's it.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Next is new business. Discussion and a vote to approve resolution SC-PR-07-2025-86, ride transportation review. Dr. Carino?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the school committee, Dr. Thornton, Mario Carreño, Chief Operations Officer for RIDE, and then you also know member of Lincoln School Committee as well, so I do this both from a state and a local perspective. I'll try to be brief today so people in the audience don't faint with this heat, but this is a good segue. As you mentioned a little while ago, federal funds are perhaps in jeopardy for this year. The prospects of them declining over the next few years is high. The state is having its own budget challenges. We have declining enrollments, which we'll see in a minute, that we should do our duty both as a state and at the local level to find as many efficiencies as possible. One of them, which is ripe for efficiency, as you'll see here, is transportation. The premise of this, and I'm starting to take this like a tour on state. You're the first one, so if we go off the rails, it's the maiden voyage of this. But I think you'll be pleased. So we're going to talk about it at a state level, so you understand the framework of where we're operating, and we'll come down to a Cumberland level. This will be useful. I know you've had conversations over the last few months. It'll be good to have the information, see where you can push, see where you can ask questions, but I think you'll find it useful. I'm hoping so. And I know that the representative from Durham is here. Please note that I am not making any assumptions that them or any bus vendor is doing anything nefarious or anything of the such, but what is true, right, we are public entities, but we're nonprofit, and the bus companies are for-profit entities. That's just a fact. But I'm not assuming that anything is going on here. The goal here is to give information, show the picture. You'll be, I think, surprised by the inefficiency that exists in Rhode Island, and to give you the ammunition to really work with your vendor in partnership to really hone down and drive the cost down as much as possible. Okay? So that's the premise. We'll go through the background. Let's start with this. I think this one, for those of you who have seen some of the presentations at the School Committee 101 or others, this is the landscape of enrollment in Rhode Island for all public schools. This includes charter schools, state schools, and traditional districts. We're down 15% or 23,000 students over the last 20 years, right? Let's do some trivia. Mr. Bacon, if you had to guess, do you think that transportation costs are down or up over this same period? They're up. You would be correct. They're up 61% in the last 8 years, 61% with less students overall. If we look at just the last 3 years, let's put the COVID years behind us. In just the last 3 years, this is statewide, the costs are up 20%. For context, inflation, right, overall inflation in our society, 9.8%. Transportation costs are double that. Salaries of the workers, 7.7%. So salaries, food service, 8.5%. Electricity, all the other buckets we found were going below inflation except for transportation costs in Rhode Island. And you may ask, why does this happen? Well, let's get to that. This was really eye-opening. So we have Rhode Island on the left and then Montgomery County, Maryland on the right. The reason I picked that one is they have essentially the same population as Rhode Island, roughly the same amount of schools. They have 25,000 more students than we do, but they do transportation for $40 million less than we do in Rhode Island. And the reason for that is because we have 65 unique LEAs. We have students going all over the place. We transport private school students that some of you may have heard in the past, and for those who aren't aware, so private school transportation is a state creation. You don't have to do that. Rhode Island has the most generous state subsidies and distances traveled for private schools of any state in the country. 10 million of this amount is just for private school students, leaving the public school districts, going to places that families have chosen. But again, that still doesn't account to the 30 to 40 million of inefficiency that exists. And our goal here is to try to work together to uncover some of that, because it's clearly shown we can do transportation for less. We're just not doing that in Rhode Island. So let's start with the framework of what exists here to help you understand. So there are two types of transportation. There's in-district, which is in town. So a resident who lives in Cumberland who goes to Ashton Elementary School goes on a Cumberland bus. But if they go to Mercy Mount, a private school in Cumberland, they also go on a Cumberland bus, right? And you pay for that 100% of the cost. There are some regions which we'll talk about in a second, but out of district is any student who goes to, for example, Mount St. Charles, or if you have career and tech students you're sending to Woonsocket or to North Smithfield, those which are out of town service is run by the state. And we'll see why in a second, but those are the main ones. So and you pay the bill for all of it, right? But it's different people running the tab. For this year, I believe Cumberland's bills are around $4.5 million. I do want to commend, before I go any further, that 20% that I showed is a state average. I looked at Cumberland. You're actually only up 6%, so you're doing something right. And I think we can dig more into that. But that's something very positive, that your costs are much less than the state's average. But so let's do statewide so we can have an understanding of what that is. So statewide transportation, we're not state workers on state buses taking your kids. That's not what it is. Statewide transportation is simply a means to efficiency. The backstory is, back in around 2008, 2009, we would have legislators driving to the State House, and they would see buses wrapped around Meeting Street School, which is serves special ed students right off of 95, with one child on every bus. And this is real data. We had 28 buses at the time coming from every town to that one school. When statewide transportation was enacted, the state, who does the routing now, knows that there's a child in Cranston and Providence and Central Falls going there. Well, rather than each community sending their own bus, we send one bus to pick all of them up. So that's the premise of statewide. And just very briefly, with the first 3 years of it, it was saving. We reduced almost $3 million just with a fraction of students. So it is possible to find these efficiencies if we start to work together and think differently. The types of students that we transport, and this is also helpful, are out-of-district special ed, foster care, and homeless students. The first three types of students are required by federal law, and those regions you see on the right don't even apply to them. The state border does not even apply to them. We have students, we had one in Lincoln going to Boston, and we had to pay the tab because those are federal requirements. You cannot do anything about those. However, if we look at the next section, our private charter and career and tech students, half of all students on statewide transportation fit in this category, which is wholly a state creation. And the way it works is we have these regions that were drawn up about 50 years ago that were based on the 10 career and tech centers we had at the time. We now have 250 CTE programs in every high school in the state. So this doesn't match what's happening, but it is what exists. And it does it lends itself to some unique routes. So we allow Smithfield to send students to $50,000 a year private schools in Barrington, but they can't go to North Smithfield. Like, it's very bizarre the way Lincoln and Cumberland were neighbors, but there's no service. Like, it doesn't make sense. But these are the rules that we operate under. The statewide costs are up, just like local costs. The big reason for that is that we have more riders on statewide, even though we have less students. So an interesting phenomenon is, even though we have less students, the number of special ed students, both in aggregate and in total number and percent, is higher than we had even 10 years ago, which is pretty eye-opening. Homeless students are up 600% the last 10 years, 600%. Last fiscal year, we had 1,000 students costing our districts $7 million. These are funds that are unbudgeted and unplanned. You can't do anything to prepare for it, but you have to pay for their cost. You may have seen in the news back in the winter, there's a state shelter that opened in Burrillville. So families are being relocated there, and then Burrillville had to pay for the tab to send them down to Westerly, and then Westerly pays for the tab back. So it's a really interesting construct. This is even more fascinating, that in Massachusetts, to help protect districts and cities and towns from students experiencing homelessness, the state pays 100% of those costs because you can't plan for them. And they pay for 0% of private schools. And in Rhode Island, we do the inverse. We have $0 for homeless students and 100% for private school students. So whether or not this construct is right is, for the purposes of today, is irrelevant because it is the law. And with that, we should make sure that every LEA is aware of laws that exist. The first one being LEAs who have private school students in that region need to be on statewide transportation because the state will pick up 100% of your tab. Fortunately, Cumberland has opted in. Effective next fiscal year, the students you are transporting to Mount St. Charles will be paid for by the state. Lincoln had 4 buses, inexplicably. It was a deal before I got there. 4 buses, they were paying 100% of the cost. They too have opted in. Lincoln will save $300,000 next year. We got calls from Coventry and North Kingstown and East Providence. So this is just a factor, again, that the state has not done a great job promoting the rules of what happens. We have a lot of turnover in districts. We have school committees that turn over. And you know, even if the bus companies can tell you, hey, we can do it for less than statewide, doesn't matter. You can't do it for less than 0. It doesn't matter what the state's cost is for private school students. The state pays the tab. So just keep that in mind. And I think that's a great construct. And I'm happy to hear that you have jumped aboard. As we're gearing up for the next year, this was something that came out last year, and the reason I'm hitting up school committees in the summer is because I want to get ahead of this. So for statewide transportation, career and tech students and the private school students, they sign themselves up for service. You don't even see them, right? They sign up on our portal, and we route them. What we find is there are many students who sign up and then decide to never, I don't want it. They don't tell anybody they're not using it, and then you're paying the bill when we're routing them to school, and it usually takes months to find it. What we found last year doing outreach with districts, so we send a roster every month of people who have signed up, and what we found was that most districts, whoever was going to, wasn't even opening the email, so they weren't checking to see if those kids even rode. So we had a meeting with North Providence, who was one of the ones who wasn't, and they have since course corrected. What they did also, they had the truancy officer do a list. They found students who weren't even in town signing up as North with fake addresses. So I would say, I'm not saying that happens, that's prevalent, but I would suggest that when you get your roster in early August, we have someone at the district go through them, verify that they are Cumberland residents, verify that they are doing the service, and then let's see, if they're not going to use it, let's make sure they opt out. We are doing as well, like we do our own search, but don't rely on the state to find these kids for you. Like, you should do the first piece. We ultimately do find them, but it takes a couple of months. We have added some changes on E-Ride where we're making parents certify that they understand there's a cost, and if they don't ride, that they should let someone know. Whether that works or not, I don't know, but to date, I checked the data as of yesterday, we have more private school students signed up than last year. So again, this number is growing, but we want to make sure that the Ghost Rider number comes down. That adds a lot of money in routes that, like, with empty seats. We shouldn't have that. That's different than if you have empty seats locally, and we can do that later. But this, from a state perspective, this is 100% avoidable for the most part. We're hoping that everyone will do their due diligence on that regard. This past year, and this I think will segue to the item that you have on the agenda today, there was a commission that was created by the General Assembly to look at statewide transportation. And we have a few things. The first one, a couple of good news stories. The first one is the state now allows larger vans to be used, which we're now mirroring Massachusetts. That's going to save about $1 million a year. We had a bunch of, which is crazy, we had the 10-passenger vans that we had to take seats out of, and we were like using more vans. We had, in some cases, had to use minibuses in instances where we can use this, but we're very confident that that actually might approach $1 million. So we're very happy with the first one. I don't know the profile of your students, but if you have vans, again, this would be a question to Durham. Make sure that they are using the 10-passenger vans in any case when possible, because there's a cost savings to use a van instead of a bus, obviously. The second one we are also pleased with is that one of the challenges in Rhode Island is that there's limited competition. There are very few bus companies that do this, and historically there have been very rigid rules that make it difficult for new companies to come in. We found this the hard way this past year with statewide. When we bid out the contract, we had a vendor who wanted to grab some new market share at really competitive prices. They had a slew of drivers in Connecticut who were experienced, who could come in temporarily to do the routes while we found Rhode Islanders, not allowed by state law. So we had to give the routes to a different vendor, and we're all paying more now, and we'll have to wait until the next time we bid to reap these savings. So the General Assembly passed a law. There's now a 120-day temporary waiver. So if there's experienced drivers in Massachusetts and Connecticut, they can come fill the void while they hire Rhode Island drivers. Typically, when a contract flips, the drivers typically will stay with, they'll stay in the town, but they'll work for another company. This will make that also more seamless because companies don't have to wait each other out. But this will reduce pricing, not immediately, but in the long run. So we're very pleased on that. We did discuss and had multiple meetings on changing the regions. The issue with that is that the people who have something to lose are the ones who come out. The ones who have something to gain, because it's not their money, it's public, they don't come out. And that's just the reality. We were having 80 letters from private school families. We were having a whole host of individuals coming out against this. We will look at this again next year. The representatives and senators who introduced the bill are going to reintroduce it in January. Again, as the budgets get tighter, this becomes more appealing. $10 million a year could be eliminated with 2 swipes of a pen, and we have the 2 sections. Whether anyone wants to entertain that or not, it's above my pay grade. And the last piece, which is why we're here today, is as part of the findings, we want to do a report to see if we can combine aspects of in-district and out-of-district and try to reduce that number I showed earlier of the 40 million. There's got to be ways, without any statutory changes, where we could do it. And we've already started to make progress. Phase 1 of the report, and the goal is very simple: fill empty seats on statewide buses. It's as simple as that. And this is already happening. I'll give you an example. We had a meeting with Coventry. I was there last week. They have 1 bus dedicated solely to Bishop Henrican, because they go there, at the same time that we have 3 statewide buses driving through Coventry to Bishop Henrican with empty seats. We just made the change last week. We are grabbing all their kids, putting them on our bus. They get to shave a bus from their local, so they get the full savings, and it doesn't increase the cost because the buses are fixed. If anything, it actually starts to reduce some of the cost because the bus have a higher utility rate. So that's the premise of this. We're going to look at private school students, CTE students, special ed students, cases where, and Providence is a great one. We found with an hour of work, we eliminated 10 buses locally just by picking off kids that were going to the Rhode Island School for the Deaf. We're limiting our scope. We're going to ramp up as part of this report to even look at the traditional district, the traditional schools. If we send students to Cumberland High School, right, because you might have some CTE students that come in, and we're driving in Cumberland, why couldn't we grab some of your high school kids and just take them there, right? And that's the premise. So the thought is, as a pilot program, any empty seats we have are being offered for free to the districts because it's no additional cost to us. We have Coventry took us up on it. We are working right now with Warwick and East Providence. We're going to see, we're going to look at your Mercy Mound students. There's no promises. It also depends if that bus is used 2 or 3 times, then perhaps it might not be a direct thing, but it may give you flexibility. It may give you options. And if we can just grab them for free, it's something to look at, whether it's now or in the future. But we've started collecting data from every district. Cumberland is one of the 20 who have sent it in so far, so thank you for that. I know that Nicole Martin from Transpar is doing a review of the data. I think questions have gone out to the districts. We want to make sure this is comprehensive, but the idea here is by the end of the year, we're going to have a full report on all the possibilities of just grabbing kids and putting them on our buses. And we are confident we will find millions of dollars of savings, and those savings will be passed 100% to the district. So there's an incentive to give us data. Thank you for that. It's a struggle to get from the other 16 who are missing. But I'm hoping as part of these presentations, they'll see why it's critical to provide us with that data. Phase 2 is what I believe is what you have on up for discussion today, is an independent route review. Again, checks and balances are foundational to our society, right? They happen in government, in private business, everywhere. You need to have a checks and balances just to make sure things stay afloat. And it may be because of things like uncertainty or other factors. It's not necessarily someone trying to take advantage of the system, but we do need a periodic check and balances. One of the items that we did as part of the statewide contract is to bulk procure a price for every community if they wanted to do an independent route review. It can be problematic to have the same vendor who does the routes also do the service because every bus is $100,000 in revenue for them, right? So there's no, without a check and balance, there's no guarantee that you actually are getting the most efficient and optimal path. So the premise behind this is that if you're interested in it, we have a company who will come out, they will actually look at the yields, like they come on site, they'll ride the buses, like they monitor you, they'll monitor it. They're gonna come in batches. I know Lincoln's doing it, Burrillville has signed on, Woonsocket's doing it, so a few are doing this exercise. But in speaking to the vendor we have, they have not done one of these without finding an efficiency. So that is good. I also believe you are doing a more comprehensive or want to do a redistricting with your new schools. They also do that report. This information feeds into that. So I spoke to them already. If you're interested, the benefit of doing this one first is that if they find anything, you can likely get that savings now, and then that data would just reduce the cost of the other one because they've already done it. So again, a thought if you're interested in that. That's phase 2, and I think the cost is about $13,000, so it's really small in the scheme of things. But this takes us to phase 3. The other part of this study is looking at inter-district possibilities, right? So let's explain for a moment. Perhaps the biggest reason for inefficiency is because we have every LEA doing this on their own. And we're doing routes on arbitrary town lines, not on proximity. Ashton Elementary School is closer to Lincoln High School than Cumberland High School. Salesville, where my children go in Lincoln, is closer to McCourt Middle School than it is to Lincoln Middle School. Northern in Lincoln is closer to your schools than some of ours. So if we were like treating this, and I did circles in clusters, what you would find is the buses travel shorter distances, which gives you an opportunity to create either different tiers or better start times. It's one or the other. I know that there's a lot of discussion on the early start time, like some have gone, like Barrington's doing 8:30, I think Cumberland has perhaps one of the earliest, but this is where you can choose whether the priority is savings, where you could have multiple tiers, or is the priority better start times, or is it somewhere in between, but it changes discussion. Again, for comparison, combined, Lincoln and Cumberland spend about $9 million a year on transportation. Pawtucket, who is the same size, we have the same amount of kids, Lincoln and Cumberland and Pawtucket, and almost the same amount of schools, they spend $6.5 million. So there is an economies of scale in working together because you can do different distances. You would route differently and plan differently if you were approaching this in a different manner. Again, this could further be expanded if Smithfield wanted in, and we would do that exercise. But this report is going to look at that, which is I'm hopeful that you're interested in it because we do have the northern ones who are hopping in. I'm going to present to Pawtucket, who's looking to accept this as well. We have examples of schools, both in Cumberland and Lincoln, closer to Pawtucket schools and some of the Cumberland schools. So there is an efficiency here. And again, this is another benefit. I'm not sure that will be the outcome or even the desired outcome, but there is an incentive that for communities that do regionalize, the state picks up half the tab. So I don't know if this report will recommend that, but if Lincoln and Cumberland were one district, the state would pick up $4.5 million of the transportation tab, in addition to then finding other economies of scale. We would probably save $5-6 million if that were the case. I'm not saying we're going to go there. I'm just planting the laws that exist now. So with that, I will turn it over to any questions on any aspect of this that the committee may have.
Great, thank you so much for this very thorough report. Truly appreciate it. Any questions from the committee? Yes, Dr. Thornton.
First, thank you for coming. For ghost riders, you had mentioned possibly if they live in town, they could opt out. Can they also opt back in later, though?
Yeah, so, I mean, that likely, yes. One of the things that you make sure you get it as part of the phase 2, if you go with it, is there's the distance is arbitrary. I think you guys do 0.75 miles for elementary schools, whether that, like Lincoln does everyone. But as part of this redistricting, maybe that goes to a mile, maybe it goes another direction. Like they'll give you information to make some of these choices. But normally, if parents want it later, you have to accommodate. But that doesn't mean you can't start with smaller buses and upgrade. Like why couldn't you have a 20-passenger bus rather than the standard buses could hold up to 72 elementary school kids, and some of them have 20 kids on them. So like there's perhaps some different conversations you can have with your vendor. Like can they start routing with smaller buses if kids aren't riding, and if you see that they're showing up, then you go bigger. Like there's perhaps ways to do that. You may want to look at that the distance marker, they're all over the place. Providence has a further one. Some have no limit. Woonsocket has policies that if you cross a railroad track, they have to take you. So you may look at Providence gives RIPTA passes. They don't even provide, for high school students, they don't even provide busing for them. So there is some flexibility you have, but you have to balance, right? There's a balance with everything, that if savings may upset residents, and not getting savings upsets other residents. So that's the work you have as a school committee, to find the sweet medium between placating as many people as possible, understanding you'll never please everyone, no matter what happens.
Any other questions? So this opportunity gives us 3 phases. One is the bus routes efficiencies. 2 is the redistrict, like looking at it for districts. And the 3rd is potentially sharing with a town like Lincoln, busing efficiencies, or you mentioned regionalizing, but stuff, and that will then help us save more money, because it'll decrease our expenses, correct?
That's correct. The nice thing is the state's paying for this one. This is already happening, phase 1. We're going through the data, and we're going to have a report that'll start to highlight some of these things. We are already acting on the low-hanging fruit. So in Providence's case, the buses that we picked off that were going to the school for the deaf, for example, weren't doing any other routes. Like, that was their route. So that was easy. If they have other buses that go to, let's say, LaSalle, and then turn around and go to a middle school, those are a little bit harder. There's a little bit more work to be done for them to shed the bus. But as we are collecting data from the districts, if we find low-hanging fruit, like the Coventry one, we're doing that immediately in time for the school year. Realistically, that this will come out in December, January. We'll send it out for discussion, and anything that we can change would likely go into effect next school year. But again, if we could find some savings here, and let's look at that Mercy Mount bus. If it's only going there, that's really easy. You shed a bus. If that bus is doing other routes, well, you would ask your vendor, if we didn't have those kids, how would you route this? Would you route it differently? The answer is obviously yes. And how would it be different? Is there more leeway with time? Can they change the vehicles? Like, you'd have a conversation with them if we were able to take them. We'll also look at are there any out-of-district special in Cumberland, any placements, or you don't have any in town? In town, is there any? Yeah, are there any out-of-districts in the town of Cumberland? No, okay, so that will be limited here, but we have one in Lincoln, Providence has a bunch, so it varies town to town. In some cases, the savings opportunities will be higher than others, but you at least have a private school here that we can look at, and then obviously the Mount St. Charles kids, we're taking those for you. But that's the exercise we're going to do for every single district, with the goal of filling as many seats as we can on statewide, because that's a fixed cost. So if we can just fill them, it doesn't add any more cost to us, and we get to pass the savings. So phase 1 is already happening, and thank you for providing that. This is the one, phase 2 and 3 go together. Not everybody wants to do this. I think one of the districts said that they had done it recently, they didn't want it. That's fine. For anyone who wants to do this, that's where they'll come on site. They want at least like 5 or 6 districts to do it, because they come for like a month at a time. We have, again, I think in the northern cluster, I think we're already at 5, so we'll schedule a time in September to come do this if you approve it. But this would happen, this would be for that $13,000 price. They will also give preliminary suggestions to this that may lead to a more detailed one, where they will look at both of these and say, hey, if Northern Elementary School in Lincoln started 12 minutes earlier, and that school in Cumberland started 12 minutes later, like, you just created a tier, right? Something that it's not even thought of now, because we are on 2 different islands, even though we share a border. And I could have walked here. So that's the premise of this one. Likely the really detailed phase 3, if let's say there's several towns interested in doing this, would probably be another study, really in depth. But again, they're going to do enough to say, hey, we looked really quickly. You could probably save X, and then we can decide what that means. Then again, there's the regionalization thing is separate. I just brought that up because that is a state law, that if you do regionalize, which has a whole host of other implications, I'm not here to sell that. I'm just here to broadcast that there is a state bonus of 50% of the cost paid for by those who regionalize. As we have the data and we have these inter-district opportunities, that report may start to make some of those suggestions. Communities can do whatever they want, but at least we can at least say we looked at it, right? We don't want to be criticized, by taxpayers for all the spending. Like the goal for both the state and for locals is how do we find efficiencies to reduce costs? Costs only go in one direction. But with minimal effort, I am confident that this one's ripe for savings. This is so, it's beyond belief how inefficient this is in Rhode Island, and I'm confident we are going to make some headway here.
Right. Any other questions? Ms. Smith and Ms. Goldstein.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. When we looked at Phase 1, this is something that you're already working on, you're already starting to look at it, and I'm just wondering, what do we need to do to see what is happening with our runs that we're using with the state? And I say this because the May and June invoices were paid tonight, and there were $126,000 that we paid the state for transportation. And we've got to find savings there, that we can't continue to take in these costs. And as you said, so I'm wondering, is this something that we are going to see for benefit for this coming year? Are you going to be talking to us and looking at that and communicating with our transportation coordinators? How's that going to work?
Yes, that is the plan. So typically for the summer students, those are likely out-of-district special ed students who you're transporting. Those are governed by federal law, so whether we take them or you take them, that cost will exist. Just for those who don't know, there are some students who cost $100,000 just to transport. And you have, like, whether we take them or you take them, they need a driver, a monitor, sometimes they need a nurse on the bus, and they might drive 50 miles away, and we're on the hook for it. So yeah, we're going to do our best with that, but for transportation, just for everyone's knowledge, we are given the locations by the district. So, and again, there's a whole federal process on best interest determinations, like where the student should go, that we're not allowed to factor cost. I mean, you can suggest that distances may not be, like, is it good to travel 50 miles each way? That's a discussion here, but we're given those routes and we have to take them. And the costs are high. We're hoping that some of these efforts with the larger vans, once we roll out into September, we have more buses and we can do more efficiencies. But at any time, just so everyone's clear, you can opt out of statewide. So if there are cases where you can offer money to a parent and say they'll take it and you're not coming, none of us do it. Or Coventry actually they bought a van and they hired a person just to do a route because they did the math that over a 5-year period it was cheaper to do that. So some people are getting extreme. For the most part, because the state boundaries and the town boundaries don't apply, these routes are like the least desirable for the busing companies, which is why they're on statewide. So you typically won't find them cheaper. We've had other districts who try to bid out all the services and the costs end up being higher, primarily because it's the same vendors bidding on the same work and they're not going to undercut a contract they got with the state. Like, that's just a reality in Rhode Island. So yeah, we can take a look at those, but because it's summer, or are these the May and June, or is this summer runs?
Those invoices were May and June, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Thornton, I mean, a big piece of this could be the homeless and the transportation on that, not the special needs that maybe need nursing or other things.
Don't know on that, Bill, I'll have to check that.
Yeah, we can check as well, but that's an unplanned aspect. And again, we had a student in Lincoln who was going to school in Boston, Massachusetts, Boston Public Schools, got placed with a family member in Lincoln, and we were paying for the ride to Boston every day. And there's no one else on that route. There's one child on that route. And then they were paying for the person back, and you can't do anything about it. So yeah, we can take a closer look, but the most common issue with these is the homeless one. And we had a similar conversation with North Kingstown. They wanted to know why their number was up, and I looked, I thought, well, you have twice as many homeless kids. Like, year to year, like that is the driver. So we can do our best to work with the companies and squeeze them and get them down, but if we have more kids, as we showed earlier, and this is actually very interesting, we're now delivering to 100 more locations than we were 10 years ago. So there's a cost to locations. We have more kids in general going on more unique routes that, like, it's difficult there. So we're doing everything in our power to reduce it, but the homeless and the special ed are the hardest. Like, we have to take them. We're hoping that the van size will help. We're looking to consolidate as much as possible, but there's a cost to take that child no matter who does it.
And I agree. I mean, I'm not saying get rid of the cost or do something to change it for the child, because that's absolutely a necessity. I think with the homeless, I was hoping that we could see some of the synergies where, we know that we have, X amount in Cumberland, X amount in Lincoln, and they were going to the same location. Are they being picked up
Yes.
together now? Or
Yes, that's already happening now. There's very few that actually like lend themselves to that, which is odd. So we have many, believe it or not, many Burrillville to Westerly and Burrillville to Charahoe routes, which you can't combine with anyone. We have Lincoln to Tiverton, like there's these unique routes, but whenever possible, that's the benefit of statewide. We have all the data, so we just loop the bus and grab whenever we can. Yes, absolutely. The other challenge is the start time of the providers. So as part of this report, we're going to look at all of the special ed providers because there are cases, and we had a conversation with Coventry last week, in that they have 3 special ed providers in Coventry, so they do that service. They all start at the same time, so they have to send 3 buses to 3 places that are next to each other. So it'll be to give recommendations, and maybe they'll work with you to change the start time. It's worked in Providence where they've had conversations with some of the private schools to do some tweaking, and for the most part they're receptive because you're bringing the kids there. But at least we'll also have that information to share and see if we can make some synergies there, because that's actually the easiest thing is staggering the start times. You can't be in 3 places at one time.
Dr. Thornton and then Ms. Smith.
You mentioned earlier, we had approximately 10 CTEs back in the day, now 250. How much has the explosion of CTEs gone into the increase of busing costs?
Oh, it's a big number. We have, I want to say, 700 or 800 kids that go, at least on our buses, to CTE programs throughout the state. The number is actually higher because the state doesn't subsidize CTE. There are places and cases where someone might just do the bus on their own because the bus may be available and they'll do it. The number is probably in the thousands. I think we have 11,000 CTE students enrolled statewide. Now, some of those are the local kids, but we have a lot of students who crisscross the state. And the way the state rules are written is that they qualify for service. And I think on statewide, it's about 800 that we have. I can follow up with the exact number after.
Last question on this topic, if I could. Do you think the state will maybe reinterpret the idea of what is substantially similar and what isn't as far as CTE?
That's not for me to answer.
Ms. Smith?
Kudos to you, Dr. Thornton, for asking the question. When we look at Phase 2 and the independent routes and getting a study done, what is the company itself going to be looking like? Are they going to come in and meet with us, or are they just going to go right to the bus company? Are they going to understand what we're seeing? Because certainly comparing prices from Pawtucket to Cumberland is not going to be the same as rural, has a lot more busing, a lot more spacing versus cities having a lot more walkers and opportunities there. So are they going to meet with us so that they can hear everything that has been discussed, what we've been looking at, where our challenges are before they begin their study?
They can. We could have them come out as part of this to come and do an introduction call with you. But the premise being that before even looking at costs, they're going to look, do you have the right amount of buses to begin with? So that's their first exercise. They typically find that you never have the right amount of buses. You might have maybe one too many, depending on the district. You might have the right amount. You actually might be doing a great job, but they're going to validate that for you. And again, that's useful because if you're going to make changes, you always want, a professional consultant who, this is what they do for a living, giving you the information to then ask, the ammunition to ask questions. They might find very minimal here in Cumberland, which would be great. But it's always good to know that someone is looking. And then again, this is going to feed your future redistricting study anyways. You're already going to do this, so you might as well take advantage of it now. We can also, and I'll speak to them, we could either do, whether it's a kickoff meeting for everyone at first before they start, like we would have the 5 or 6 districts, whether we have a forum or a Zoom meeting, and then once they have their findings, we can have them come present at school committee for sure. I think that would be very beneficial. But that would be the intent of this work.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that Cumberland has done well, as you said, in keeping the cost down, is that there's been a lot of involvement, a lot of questions, a lot of looking at things, a lot of people involved, invested interest in it, and that certainly has helped minimize our costs and making sure that we are the most efficient that we can be. But there's lots of little things, and you know this from living in Lincoln as well. You know, if they're not understanding the district and they're looking at it just on a numbers basis and a map basis, they're not going to see things like Tower Hill Road that can't fit a larger bus because it's too windy. Like, things like that, and like, you know, if they have conversations ahead of time, all of these little things, our transportation coordinator knows all of this stuff. It's already been put out there. So
I
it's not
understand.
just the bus company telling them something.
Oh, correct. My understanding is they will be at each district for 1 week to actually go see things, to discuss with whoever they need to meet with. They'll meet with your bus vendor, they'll meet with your coordinator, with superintendent, whoever else is beneficial. But they come and do it on the ground. They're not doing this from out of state on a computer, because you're right, you wouldn't find those items without having conversations, for sure.
Excellent. Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Dean?
So you mentioned that we had our vendor in here, was it last meeting, talking about bus prices, and we found it kind of shocking that the smaller buses cost more just because of the monitor that's on them that is specialized for the special needs students, because most of the smaller buses. But there's a mid bus that was even less, but it was still around, what, 400,000? I'm sorry, $4,000, $400 a day. And, you know, the bigger buses were over $550 or something like that a day for the larger buses. Those homeless students, is there a prohibition about giving them like a voucher to use the economy to come in and out, like a Uber or a Lyft?
So we've looked at that. In some places in Massachusetts, they use taxis for some of these.
Yeah.
That would require a change in state law. We discussed it as part of the commission. It didn't get that much traction, but yeah,
Yeah.
we looked at it, like some states do it, that it makes sense. What we found was, like, for the larger, more rural states, that it was the most economic way, was call a taxi or call an Uber driver to do it. For the more densely populated ones, with the vans, you can usually scoop 2 or 3,
Yeah.
and it would wash out. But yeah, that's something that I'm hoping that like the state report will also include some of those changes for sure. And to your first part on the different sizes, that phase 2 will uncover all that for you. Like, what is the most economic? That's exactly what they would do. Is, hey, we're seeing that you have some oversized buses here. Why don't you downsize and save X?
Yeah, yeah.
Do this and make some tweaks. It's there, and then you can have a conversation with your vendor. Now again, they may not find anything.
Yeah.
I'm not insinuating that they are. But I know that statewide, just looking at the data, they will find a lot. And I don't know if it'll be in Cumberland, but they're going to find a lot of savings. I promise you that.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
I apologize, I have another one now. Thank you, Mr. Dean, because that got my brain thinking on something else. So we all know that we're required to provide busing needed, whatever. We set our distances, we do all of those different things. You know, in our case, we've even changed our policy to allow depots, and which I think, we made quite clear in our last meetings that we want that to be looked at in many ways. But when we look at the entire view of all of the busing and we look at opportunities, we know that we can ask parents to opt in. And that just fell flat when that started and you could opt into buses. Every parent felt the same way. Oh, that's my right to have a bus. I'm going to opt in for the bus. And then they weren't using it. Or they may need it 1 day or 2 days. Maybe there's some emergency situations that may happen during the year. And, is it an opportunity for us to work with the state, and how would you feel? Is there a way for us to try to get an opt-out to the parents so that they can opt out and we give them the decision on what they want, but then maybe work on some type of, some type of scenario, some type of bill that says, okay, we understand that there may be emergencies, so 3 times a year, if there's an emergency, we'll put you on the bus, or we'll pay an Uber, or something like that. Are those opportunities that we're going to be able to work with and try to find solutions on that side?
Yeah, so I'll give a state example before I do a Lincoln one, but we are thinking, in addition to those ghost riders, is when the letters go out letting them know where their bus is, we're hoping to pilot a opt-out form for that very reason, because some might just tell us right then and there that they don't want it. Now, if they change their mind, we'll deal with it later, but it's easier to at least have the information. So we're trying that in Lincoln. We have, mayor buses are half full. Like, people say they're gonna ride and they never ride. So we struggle with the same issue. I bet every town in Rhode Island does. That may have some value to see if anyone at least will willingly say, I don't want it. And then again, with different information, buses would be routed differently. Even if 100 students said, I'm all set, I don't want it, 100 out of your 4,000, well, again, that's maybe a busload that is saved. So it's worth, at least, I would at least try it. We're trying with the state. I'm hoping we'll try it in Lincoln. I don't know if we'll, with like the short time, we may not be able to roll out this year, but the idea for the state is to roll it out in the August mailing to the families.
Dr. Thornton?
For the base price, I'm wondering, can the company do more than one scenario? And by that, I mean, our committee has a real interest in start times and maybe changing start times. And we have 2 tiers on elementary, which is probably not common. So I wonder, could they look at A, how efficient we are, and B, could they change start times? And if so, what would that look like?
My understanding is that is included in the price. What I'd like to do, Dr. Thornton, is I'll set up maybe a Zoom call with the vendor. If this is approved tonight, next week, you guys can have a kickoff meeting, whether you want to include others, but at least to have an understanding, you can ask your questions, but that is included, looking at the different start times, is included as part of this price.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Adams?
Generally be seen and not heard, but I wanted to ask about the private school. Is there any interest among our friends in the assembly to do anything about that?
What do you think?
Okay. Is there any?
So, I will say this, we had a meeting, if you want, I'll send you the link if you want. We had the Transportation Commission, which had 6 legislators on it. I was on it on behalf of RIDE. We had RIPTA, we had superintendents, school committees on there. We had a very long meeting in February where we discussed this. Number one, to make everyone aware that what we do in Rhode Island is unique. We are the only ones to do this. We don't have to do it, but we are doing it. And again, even the legislators on there were split as to whether we should do it or not, because they're hearing from their constituents that they have to have the service to Bishop Henrican or LaSalle or Mount St. Charles, wherever it may be. So there was a split between at least the members of the assembly that I spoke with. And then again, what happens is when the letters we get, maybe we did get at that meeting quite a bit of support, public comment verbally, but I think of the written comments, we had 80 letters against changing anything, and I think 2 in favor, and when it got a hearing at the House, you can imagine who showed up. And then that's what they see, and nobody wants to tackle that. Now, again, over the last 5 years with ESSER funds and ARPA funds and money all over the place, that was a non-starter. As things start to get tighter with, you hear on the news, $30 million of federal money for Rhode Island is in jeopardy. Well, we could get $10 million back like that without changing anything. But whether they want that or not, I can't speak for them.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. So pleasure of the committee regarding to approve the resolution SC-PR-07-2025-86, RIDE Transportation Review. Motion by Mr. Bacon,
Second.
second by Ms. Smith. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. Thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Discussion and a vote to approve resolutions. Ms. Smith?
So we do have resolutions on here tonight. I want to first pull out number 1, SCPR 06-2025-68. We did table this last meeting, and the information is still not to our liking, so that is being tabled again tonight. So in total, we have, I don't know how many because I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 resolutions remaining. SCPR 07-2025-87 through 94. These were discussed and passed 3-0 in fiscal subcommittee, and I would move passage of all 8.
Ms. Smith makes a motion to pass of resolutions SC-PR-07-2025-87 through -94. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Dean, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. Discussion and/or vote to approve the payment of bills. Ms. Smith?
Yes, this evening we had payment of the bills in total of $2,178,098.90. And those were discussed, and that did pass in fiscal subcommittee 3-0, and I would move passage of payment of the bills.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith makes a motion to pass the payment of the bills in the amount of $2,178,098.90. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Dean. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. Dr. Thornton, do we need to go into executive session? Thank you very much. Next, I have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Bacon.
Second.
Second by Ms. Shea. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes 6-0. We adjourn at 8:12 PM on July